Osho, J. Krishnamurti, The Silent Bond of Enlightenment. The relationship between J. Krishnamurti and me is truly mysterious. From the moment I learned about him, I felt a deep love and respect for him, and he too had great affection for me. Yet, we never met. That's what makes this relationship so difficult to put into words. Though we never stood in each other's presence, we were perhaps the closest two individuals could ever be. Our connection was so profound that it required neither words nor physical presence. There was a moment, purely coincidental, when Krishnamurti and I were both in Bombay at the same time. Every year, Krishnamurti would visit Bombay for a few weeks, and on this occasion, I happened to be there too, though only for a few hours before heading to New Delhi. A few mutual friends who were both close to Krishnamurti and myself saw this as a rare opportunity. They excitedly told me, "This is a golden chance. Both of you are in the same place. This meeting will be of great significance and Krishnamurti wants to meet you." One of these friends was Ajit Patvardhan, a highly respected man in India and one of Krishnamurti's closest associates. I looked into his eyes and said, "Don't lie to me. You must have told Krishnamurti that Osho wants to meet you." He was taken aback, exclaiming, "How did you know? That's exactly what we planned. We knew that if we said Krishnamurti wants to meet you, you wouldn't refuse. And if we told Krishnamurti that Osho wants to meet you, he wouldn't refuse either. Everyone who knows you both is eager to see what will happen when you meet." I responded by telling Ajit Patvardhan a story about two great mystics, Kabir and Farid. Kabir lived near Varanasi, on the banks of the Ganges. Farid, a Sufi mystic, was traveling with his disciples and would soon pass through the village where Kabir lived. The disciples of both masters insisted that they meet. Kabir's disciples urged him. It would be disrespectful for Farid to pass through without inviting him to stay for a few days. Meanwhile, Farid's disciples told him it would be improper to pass by Kabir's home without paying respects. Both mystics agreed to meet, but their disciples were not simply interested in courtesy. They were eager to see what would happen when these two enlightened beings met. What would they say to each other? What profound truths would be exchanged? Yet, when Kabir and Farid met, they spoke not a single word. Their disciples were deeply disappointed. This was not what they had expected. After the meeting, both masters faced questions from their followers. Kabir's disciples protested, "You made fools of us. We waited eagerly for 2 days, expecting some great wisdom. You always teach us so much, but this time, you fell completely silent. We don't understand." There was laughter, tears, deep embraces, but no words at all. Farid's disciples had the same reaction. They too asked why their master had remained silent. Both Kabir and Farid gave the same response. "We knew that there was nothing to say. He has eyes, and so do I. Both of us have experienced the same truth. What more is there to discuss? Whoever speaks would reveal their ignorance." We recognized each other instantly. Even two blind men can recognize each other, so do you think two awakened beings would not? Of course, we love each other. That's why laughter and tears were our only language. When the heart is overwhelmed, words are unnecessary. We sat together in silence, holding hands, and love flowed effortlessly between us. That was our conversation. Two bodies, one soul. But forgive us, we completely forgot about all of you. Perhaps you only understand words, but truth cannot be spoken. You have every right to be disappointed, even angry, but try to understand our position. We had no other choice. When two silences meet, they merge into one. When two loving hearts beat together, they synchronize into a single rhythm. This is a music beyond the world, a melody that cannot be heard by the ears but only felt by the heart. After telling this story, I turned to Ajit Patvardhan and said, "This meeting is pointless. It would only waste Krishnamurti's time. You would not hear a single word. Later, when they went to Krishnamurti, he asked, "What happened? Did he not come?" They told him the story, explaining, "Osho only shared a parable with us." Krishnamurti burst into laughter and said, "He did the right thing. In fact, I should have told you that story myself, but I did not know it. I also wanted to explain to you that the meeting would have been meaningless, but I knew you would not understand." On denying defilement. In the centuries since the Buddha's time, teachers who follow the canon have adopted the vision of the path as purification, stressing the need to cleanse the mind of its defilements if awakening is to occur. In the Thai wilderness tradition, for instance, teachers frequently describe Dhamma practice as an attempt to outwit the defilements so as to end their obscuring influence in the mind. To practice, they say, is to learn how little you can trust the mind's urges and ideas because they're darkened with the defilement of delusion, whose darkness in turn can allow greed, aversion, and all the other derived defilements to grow. Only by questioning the mind's urges and ideas can you free yourself from the influence of these defilements, leaving the mind totally pure. But many modern Western teachers, anticipating that their listeners would react unfavorably to hearing their minds called defiled, have abandoned the concept entirely. Even when discussing the problems of greed, aversion, and delusion, they tend to avoid describing them as defilements. The closest they come is calling them poisons, whose source they trace, not to the mind, but to its external conditioning and its mistaken belief that these poisons are real. Awakening, in this view, is a matter not of washing away defilement, but of accepting the mind as it is, realizing that it's already pure. There are several reasons for why modern teachers are probably correct in anticipating a negative reaction to the idea of the mind as defiled, the primary reason coming from modern Western psychology. Many psychotherapists have identified low self-esteem as a prime cause of mental suffering, and the ability to silence the voice of the inner hypercritic as the prime way to end that suffering. Because the notion of defilement is critical of such normal mind states as greed, aversion, and delusion. They see it as unhealthy, a cause of suffering rather than a tool to bring suffering to an end. This view is sometimes bolstered by appeals to Western cultural history. People coming to Buddhism are often reacting to the doctrine of original sin, which tells them that the nature of their mind is basically depraved. Many, unaware of the source, have adopted the standard Western counter-arguments to this doctrine. One is the idea advanced by European romantics and American transcendentalists that the urges in the mind are essentially divine in origin and thus basically good. Another is the postmodern idea that any discourse of defilement or depravity is a political attempt to gain power over others by telling them that their minds are so defiled that they can't trust themselves to think straight and so need outside help. However, the most powerful support for the idea that there's nothing wrong with greed, aversion, and delusion comes from modern. The importance of humor in spirituality. Religion needs more humor. It needs to be more human, more alive. Without humor, religious discourses become overly intellectual, overly precise, overly logical, but they lose the warmth of human connection. Religion without laughter turns into a science, into a sterile subject of study. But human beings cannot simply be scientific subjects. They need something beyond intellect. Look at the world. Trees do not laugh. Buffaloes do not laugh. No other creature in existence has a sense of humor. Only humans do. This must mean something significant because humor has emerged at the highest level of evolution. human consciousness. Krishnamurti's teachings were insightful, beautiful, but too serious. In my experience, he wasted 70 years being overly serious. As a result, only those who were already sorrowful, those who carried a deep seriousness, were drawn to him. He attracted a following of lifeless, somber individuals. His gatherings were like graveyards, full of serious faces, people burdened with intellectual weight but no joy. Life needs a touch of playfulness, a spark of laughter. This is my only disagreement with him. Otherwise, he was a genius. But Krishnamurti failed because he did not touch people's hearts. He only reached their minds. And the heart requires a different approach. This is where he and I diverge. Until you reach a person's heart, no matter how beautiful your words are, they remain empty, like a parrot repeating phrases without meaning. Everything Krishnamurti said was true, but he failed to bring it into the hearts of people. In other words, J. Krishnamurti was a great philosopher, but he never became a master. He could not guide others, could not prepare them for a new life, a new vision. But despite his shortcomings, I still love him. Among all the philosophers, he came the closest to mysticism. However, Krishnamurti avoided mysticism, skirting its edges, and that is why he ultimately failed. He was the only modern thinker who came so close, almost touching the boundary of mysticism, but he stopped short. Perhaps Krishnamurti feared that if he spoke about mysticism, people would fall back into old traditions, into outdated spiritual structures. That fear kept him from fully embracing the mystical path. But in the end, that very fear also prevented many others from stepping into the great mystery of existence. The wounds of the past. J. Krishnamurti opposed masters and disciples because of an old wound, one that had healed but left deep scars. He was forced into discipleship at a very young age. When he was just 9 years old, he was taken in by Annie Besant and the Theosophists. At that tender age, he had no awareness of what was being imposed upon him. He was subjected to a rigorous discipline, training around the clock, because one of the Theosophists, Leadbeater, had foreseen that this boy would become the world teacher, the vessel for the coming of the Maitreya. He had to be prepared to receive the incarnation of the Buddha, and thus he was subjected to severe discipline in various ways. He was not allowed to eat like other children, to play with them, or to live a normal child's life. He was shielded from the world, prevented from attending school, practically imprisoned. Each morning he had to wake up at 3 o'clock, perform elaborate purification rituals, and engage in numerous esoteric practices drawn from Tibetan, Chinese, Indian, and Egyptian traditions. The demands placed on him were beyond exhausting. The final wound came when his younger brother, Nityananda, passed away. Both Krishnamurti and Nityananda had been undergoing training together because no one was certain which of them would become the true master. Nityananda's death was a devastating blow. Krishnamurti had loved his brother deeply, his only family, the only person he could truly call his own. Their mother had died. Their father was unable to care for them, and they had been placed in the hands of Annie Besant, who took them around the world for rigorous spiritual training. The discipline imposed on them was harsh, and it is very likely that Nityananda died because of the excessive strain. Krishnamurti had never chosen his teachers out of love. They were like prison wardens, and the teachers were like guards. It was impossible for him to develop a healthy concept of what a true master was. He had been trapped in their system for so long, and when he finally gained the strength to break free, he did so decisively. He simply walked away and declared, "I am not anyone's master, nor will I be the world's teacher. This is all meaningless." That wound left a scar. Ever since, he rejected the idea of masters, discipleship, monastic orders, and all forms of spiritual discipline. This was only natural. In truth, he had never experienced a genuine master, nor had he known what true discipleship meant, because discipleship is not something imposed, but something embraced with love and joy. Krishnamurti never spoke much about this past, because there was no point. His oppressors were long dead, but somewhere deep inside, the wound remained. That is why he opposed masters, disciples, monks, and all forms of meditative training. This was not an objective judgment of masters and their students, but rather a personal reaction to his own painful experiences. What did he truly know about the Buddha and his disciples? What did he know about Atisha and the great masters like Dharmakirti, Dharmarakshita, and Yogin Maitreya? He knew nothing of them. Annie Besant and Leadbeater had never allowed him to read ancient scriptures because they feared he would lose sight of the path they had designed for him. Thus, he remained unaware of the world's great spiritual traditions. Had he known about Atisha and Dharmakirti, he would have encountered an entirely different reality. Dharmakirti once told Atisha, "I have given you all that I know. I could teach you more, but it would not be my path. You must seek out Dharmarakshita. He follows a different way. He will show you something I can only glimpse from a distance. I have given you emptiness. Now, to learn compassion, you must go to Dharmarakshita." What extraordinary beings! And when Atisha reached Dharmarakshita, the teacher told him, "I can only teach you feminine compassion, the passive kind. If you wish to learn a more active, engaged form of compassion, you must find Yogin Maitreya." These were not men who sought to possess, control, or dominate others. They were masters of liberation. Krishnamurti, however, knew nothing of these traditions. He had only encountered the Theosophists, and that was a tragedy. The theosophical movement of his time was a complete mess, a gathering of fools under the guise of esotericism. It was a desperate attempt to create a synthesis of all the world's religions, but such a synthesis is impossible. If you try to create it artificially, you end up with a lifeless skeleton rather than a living, breathing reality. It is like someone who admires many women. One has beautiful eyes, another has a perfect nose, another has lovely lips. If he were to take each feature and assemble them into one person, what would he create? A corpse. In trying to create perfection, he would destroy everything that was originally beautiful. That is precisely what Theosophy did, picking a little from Hinduism, a little from Taoism, a little from Islam, a little from Judaism, mixing them all together and expecting a miracle. But what they created was a dead philosophy, not a living path. The tragedy is that Krishnamurti was forced to grow up in such an environment, but he had a phenomenal intelligence, a rare clarity of vision. Anyone else in his position would have been completely lost, but Krishnamurti had the courage, the audacity, and the intelligence to break free from that cage. It was not easy for him. Simply surviving was a monumental challenge. That is why I deeply respect him, why I admire him tremendously, and that is why I completely understand his resistance to masters, disciples, and monks. The observer is the observed. Krishnamurti's most profound teaching. J. Krishnamurti's statement, "The observer is the observed," is one of the most profound declarations ever made by a human being. It is as extraordinary as Krishnamurti himself. It is difficult to grasp this statement purely through logical reasoning, as rational thought operates through duality. In logical reasoning, the subject cannot be the object. The observer cannot be the observed. This is because logic fundamentally divides reality. The knower and the known must be separate for knowledge to exist. A scientist cannot become science itself. The scientist must always remain distinct from the object of study. The experimenter cannot become the experiment. Within the domain of rational thought and logic, this makes perfect sense. Yet, there exists a knowledge that transcends understanding, a mode of knowing beyond the limits of science. It is precisely because such knowledge exists that mysticism arises, that faith emerges. Let's examine this from another angle. Science divides all human experience into two categories, the known and the unknown. What is known today was once unknown yesterday. What is unknown today may become known tomorrow. Thus, the unknown is simply a temporary state that can be overcome. Science assumes that as knowledge expands, ignorance diminishes. In other words, as one learns more, the domain of the unknown shrinks, while the domain of the known expands. Following this logic, the ultimate conclusion would be that one day there will be nothing left unknown. Gradually, all that is unknown will transform into the known, and the final moment will arrive when there is nothing left to discover. This is the goal of science, to eliminate ignorance. But to eliminate ignorance also means to eliminate the very drive for discovery, the very force that propels humanity forward. Eliminating ignorance would mean the death of intelligence itself, for intelligence would no longer be needed. It would become something obsolete, something to be stored in museums, a relic of the past, no longer of any use. This is not a very inspiring vision. Mysticism, however, does not agree with science. It goes beyond science. According to mysticism, existence and human experience are divided into three parts. The known, what has been discovered. The unknown, what can be discovered in the future. The unknowable, what will always remain a mystery. What is known today was once unknown. What is unknown today will become known tomorrow. But the unknowable will always remain unknowable. It is eternally mysterious. No matter what you do, mystery will always surround existence. Mystery will always remain in life, in love, in meditation. You can eliminate ignorance, but in doing so, you cannot destroy the wonder, the magic, the mystery of existence. Krishnamurti's statement belongs to the realm of the unknowable. I have explained this before. When you meditate, you become increasingly aware of your mind's processes. If your mind is operating at 100% capacity, consuming all your energy, you will be lost in sleep internally. There will be no awareness. One morning, the Buddha was speaking to his disciples. King Prasenjita was present, sitting right in front of him. As a king, he was unaccustomed to sitting on the ground and felt uncomfortable, shifting his position frequently, trying not to disturb the Buddha. Without any particular reason, he kept fidgeting with his toe. Some people cannot remain still. They must always be doing something. The Buddha suddenly stopped speaking and asked, "Prasenjita, can you tell me why you keep moving your toe?" In reality, the king had not even realized he was doing it. You engage in countless activities unconsciously. Unless someone points them out, you do not recognize them. The moment the Buddha asked, the king's toe stopped moving. The Buddha then asked, "Why did you stop moving your toe?" The king replied, "You made me aware of it. I had no idea I was moving it. I just realized how foolish it was, and in that realization, the movement stopped by itself. I did nothing, neither to move it nor to stop it." The Buddha turned to his disciples and said, "Do you understand? His toe belongs to him, yet it was moving without his awareness. The moment he became conscious of it, because I asked him, it stopped immediately. The realization itself was enough to bring it to a halt." Your mind is like a busy highway, where thoughts are constantly in motion, rushing in all directions, trapped in an eternal rush hour. Meditation means observing the traffic of thoughts within your mind. Become a witness, as if you are standing on the roadside watching the flow of traffic, without judgment, without evaluation, without accusation or praise, just observing. As you become more familiar with this witnessing, something strange begins to happen. If you are 10% aware, that portion of your energy shifts from the mind's processes to the observer. Now, the mind is only operating at 90% capacity. Over time, the mind's activity reduces further. You become 50% the observer, 50% the mind. Your energy increases as the mind's grip weakens. Eventually, when you are 90% the observer and only 10% the mind, your mind is barely active. At 100% awareness, the mind disappears completely. The highway becomes empty. The screen of the mind is utterly blank. There is nothing left to observe. Only the observer remains. This is the state Krishnamurti was referring to. When there is nothing left to observe, when only the observer remains, the observer becomes the observed, because there is nothing else to be observed. The knower simply knows itself. The witness sees only itself. The energy that once flowed toward objects, thoughts, and experiences now has nowhere to go. It turns inward, illuminating itself, a flame burning in the vast emptiness of existence. This is what Krishnamurti meant. The observer becomes the observed. You may call this enlightenment, when light shines upon itself, when there is nothing left for it to illuminate but itself. At this point, you have dissolved into the mind completely. You are one, totally awake and aware. Krishnamurti had his unique way of expressing this truth. He was meticulous about using his own terminology, avoiding the words of other masters. But while expression can change, the experience itself is eternal. Regardless of whether someone calls it enlightenment, nirvana, samadhi, or ilaham, the essence remains unchanged. You may give it any name, but names do not alter the experience itself. Krishnamurti's language did not change the reality of the experience. His phrase, "The observer is the observed," may sound too intellectual, too mundane, lacking the poetic beauty of Buddha's nirvana, Patanjali's samadhi, or Muhammad's ilaham. But his words still pointed to the same truth. No matter what name is given, the experience of illumination remains the same. Krishnamurti's final regret: a life spent in vain. One of my friends met Krishnamurti just 3 days before his passing. He told me that Krishnamurti seemed deeply sorrowful, and the only thing he said was, "I have worked tirelessly to reach people, but instead of transforming them, I have merely wasted my energy, like a river vanishing into the desert." Those who listened to me saw it as mere entertainment, nothing more. And it is this word, entertainment, that breaks my heart, that my entire life has been nothing more than the life of a performer amusing others. And perhaps he was right. He passed away, yet no one even mentioned his death anywhere on this earth. A man who lived for 90 years and dedicated himself to humanity since the age of 25 seemed to have disappeared as if he had died centuries ago. No one remembered him. No one felt the need to pay him tribute. He was one of the greatest figures of his century, yet the Nobel Prize Committee never considered him because he was not a politician. From the very beginning, he attempted to reach out to the world, but he was rejected by religions, condemned by all religious authorities. Gradually, he gave up hope in humanity. He had a few devoted followers in a handful of cities worldwide. In India, he only visited New Delhi, Bombay, Varanasi, and Rishi Valley, where his schools were located, just 4 places. Similar schools existed around the world, but it was always the same people listening to him for 30, 40, 50 years. And the saddest part? Even after 50 years of listening to him, they had not changed. He could not find true companionship. He gave his utmost effort. But people have become colder, more asleep, more intoxicated with distractions, and awakening them has only become more difficult.